Number 6. During first fire, half squads can only fire a single support weapon and lose their inherent firepower. But in subsequent first fire, final protective fire, or final fire versus an adjacent enemy unit, they still retain their inherent firepower. So in this situation, if this German unit moves into these woods and this squad and light machine gun has already first fired the light machine gun, they can instead choose to fire just their inherent firepower in subsequent first fire, thus negating the potential of the light machine gun breaking down because the breakdown number is reduced by 2. But during final protective fire, if this happened to be a berserk German unit that is going to move into that hex, then this French unit is then forced to use the light machine gun in that situation. Number 7. Fire groups and adjacency. There are 2 types of adjacent definitions in Advanced Squad Leader. There are adjacent hexes, which is very simple. W7 is adjacent to W6. V6 adjacent to U6. Then there's another definition of adjacent, which is in all capitalization, and that's what's important in the case of fire groups here. Let me read that definition for you, which is actually buried in the index and glossary. It's not in the actual text of the rules, so just look up adjacent in the ASL index and glossary and you'll find this. Locations and units in them are considered adjacent, in all caps, if any infantry unit in one location could conceivably, ignoring any enemy presence, advance into the other during the advance phase and a line of sight exists between the 2 locations. Now for starter kit, this does not apply. In starter kit, there's no definition of location. For fire groups, in order to form a fire group, you must be adjacent. So let's look at these 2 examples here. We have these French units over on the left. They want to fire at this German engineer squad. These 2 locations, the hexes are adjacent, but the locations are also adjacent because conceivably each of these units could advance into the other hex during the advance phase. It's just each is just a woods hex. So these 2 could form a fire group and fire with 8 firepower onto here with various modifiers. Now let's look at these units here. There's a French squad on the ground floor, level 0 in this building, and there's a unit here on level 1, the upper level of this 2 hex building. The hexes are adjacent, but the locations are not adjacent. This squad could not advance up into the first level of this building during the advance phase, and vice versa. Thus, these 2 squads cannot form a fire group to fire at this German enemy unit. Now, for the sake of completionism, let's take a look at if there was a French squad down on the ground floor there. Now, these 3 units could form a fire group. There is adjacency in all caps between this location, the ground floor location of this building hex, and the first level of this building hex due to a stairwell there. So they could do a 3 squad fire group and fire at this German unit with 12 firepower. So for those full ASL players, make sure you understand the difference between adjacent, the generic term meaning adjacent hexes, and adjacent locations with regard to forming fire groups, and that definition is in the ASL index and glossary. Number 8, cowering and fire groups. Let's say it's the German movement phase. We have these 3 free French squads. The German unit moves here. These 3 form a fire group. They're all adjacent, and I roll a 6, double 3s. Doubles, that means they cower, but for the purposes of determining which ones are marked with a final fire counter because they cowered, you do random selection. So you would roll 3, 6, 4, we'll just call it left to right. So highest would be marked with a final fire counter, and the other two would be marked with a first fire counter. Not all the units are marked with a final fire counter. Random selection must be used to determine what type of counter to put on it. I forget this one all the time. Number 9, pinned units and rate of fire. Let's say for whatever reason this French squad and medium machine gun were previously pinned and they want to fire at this German squad. If I happen to roll a 6 with a red 2, that means the machine gun would have normally gotten rate of fire, but pinned units cannot use rate of fire. They lose all ability to retain rate of fire for any support weapon or gun they're manning if they happen to be a crew. So the attack, in this case, would still go forward, but there would be no rate of fire for the medium machine gun. Number 10, let's expand on the previous example about pinning. Let's say this fire group here with the leader is pinned. The leader is essentially rendered nearly useless because he is pinned. He is not able to use his leadership modifier. He cannot direct attacks, thus possibly preventing cowering, nor can he aid any morale check, task check, because he's lost his leadership modifier. So a pinned leader is rendered nearly useless from a leading a squad or fire group point of view.